Hey, thank you so much for joining us today. Of course, I want you to subscribe because this is amazing. And I have a really cool guest I'm introducing you today, Mark Sherwood.
Hey.
Thank you.
Sarah, thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Totally stoked.
Yeah.
Mark, tell us a little bit of who you are, what kind of background, and why we're hearing you.
My background's a little bit unique. I was a police officer for a couple decades and decided to get off into the health and wellness field. So I went back to school and became a naturopathic doctor, where I now get to practice with my best friend and wife, Dr. Michele, in Tulsa, Oklahoma. So we have a mission to lead people down a pathway of true healing.
Yeah, and why did you want to be a policeman?
You know, that's a great question. It was, there's always been something within us as human beings that sort of wants to fulfill our call in life, you know. And a call in life I've had, and I really am passionate about this, is to really help people. Protection and service is kind of the mentality. It hasn't changed a bit. I mean, I think in all my years of doing that, the most rewarding things are seeing the ability to get somebody out of a situation, life and death or whatever, and really help them out. So there is joy in giving somebody sort of a leg up and some help.
Mm-hmm. And growing up, what did your parents do?
My parents, interestingly enough, I'm adopted, so it was cool. My parents taught me early on that I was selected and chosen, which made me feel kind of cool about that, you know. So they handled it right. So I'm grateful for those parents that bring on an adoption like that. And I'm also grateful for the parents that will allow a child to experience something like that. So I grew up in a, relatively speaking, Christian home. My dad was a deacon. My mom played the organ, and I've said it before, old joke, but it's a lot of fun. The only drug problem that I ever had was being drugged to church every Sunday morning, Sunday night, Wednesday night, to all the potluck dinners and all that. Gave my life to Christ when I was 8 years old. My life changed at that point, and it's been a really cool journey since then.
Mm-hmm. And how old were you when you were adopted?
I was just under a year old.
Gotcha.
Yep.
And you have siblings?
I do. I actually discovered them, you know, later on in life. I've got one half brother and 3 half sisters that I discovered probably 15 years ago.
Mm-hmm. And was that interesting? Did you meet them?
Oh my goodness, it was crazy because, you know, when you meet your siblings, and I actually met my birth mother, which was kind of cool, it was healing. So healing for them. I had no idea. You know, you don't know how people live with that. You know, how do parents that father and mother a child, how do they live with that? Turns out she was celebrating my birthday every year with this grievous thing. So very sad, but it was healing for her. They've all since passed at this point. You know, my grandparents, and it was really cool. But it was like almost a piece that was missing in your heart. You know, it doesn't take the place of your parents. I mean, let's make sure we understand that. Yeah. I'm grateful. But there's always that piece that says, well, what do they look like? Are there people that look like me? Where would I have been in that case? And that was unbelievable, that experience, yeah.
Mm-hmm. That's cool. So then your teen years, did you have any struggles with like connecting with your adopted parents? Was that an issue at all for you?
You know, you don't think it is until you get back and you're an adult and then you look back at it. And there is a concept of separation. You know, you think that you're different, and you always have that sort of I've been neglected or I've been left out, or almost like this lack of self-appreciation. And you deal with that. And if we begin to own that, and I did finally in my middle adult years, I guess, it took me a while, you begin to understand that, you know, things worked out for a reason. You know, God has a plan, and He will take any situation, good, bad, or indifferent, and He'll make that for your good if you will allow it. And that's the key thing, if you will allow it. So it was really interesting through my early adult years working through that because, you know, other families had a different dynamic. I mean, our family was great, but it was a different dynamic. You know, they had blood brothers and sisters and all this. They looked the same. So it was just unique.
Mm-hmm. And did you sense God kind of in your childhood and your teen years, did you sense God kind of leading you in some of that stuff? Or how did God play out? You got saved when you were 8, but then what did that look like as in your childhood and teen years? Yeah,
as I was growing up, I did sense God calling me in directions of helping people and helping mend the brokenhearted, because a lot of people carry wounds that are generated from occurrences in childhood where they had no control over. You know, you don't pick your parents, you don't pick your environment, you don't pick your culture, you don't pick the country, state, city you're born in, you don't pick your skin color. These things, these wounds that we generate as a child, they begin to affect us as adults. And I did sense God calling me in that direction to sort of get into that. Even right now, as in my current career, I mean, we specifically tie, Sarah, the emotional and spiritual brokenness into physical manifestation of disease. And that's fascinating. And if we would begin to put those together, we would see real resolve and healing in all three of those areas at the same time.
That's completely true. So then you met your wife, and how did that play out? How old were you, and what did that look like?
Oh, I met my wife about 10 years ago, and at the time she was completely married to medicine, if you will.
Yeah.
And I had been out of a marriage for about 10 years, and I had swore off women. I was like, I'm done with this, man. You know, no way. I was a single parent, and it was challenging to say the least. But here's what I learned in that. When I became independent with God, when I became a person that did not need anybody but God, that's the key point. I became ready for a relationship at that point. And my wife and I, when we met, it was truly love at first sight. I remember shaking her hand and couldn't let go. It was the awkwardest moment ever, you know? I mean, like, there's people around, and what am I going to do with that? Am I going to ask her out to dinner or whatever? But it was love at first sight. And so all that to say this, when we did meet, we were two independent people functioning independently with God, where we could come together and become, you know, interdependent, if you will. And it's not like this, where one leans on the other one in this way. That's codependency.
Right.
So, you know, I think that's where a lot of relationships go awry, or maybe they start off on the wrong foot, so to speak. But yeah, it's been a blessing, totally a blessing ever since.
And then the transition from being a police to moving in the healthcare profession, what did that transition look like?
My friends, colleagues and coworkers thought I was an idiot. They thought I was stupid because I was in my 40s. What am I doing going back to school and learning at that point? You're too old. But I've never met a challenge that I didn't take on. And, you know, there are personalities, and I suspect you're one of those personalities. You say, you can't do this, I bet you can't. You're going to do it. That's just a stubbornness that we probably all have, and it's good. So I took that, but I knew God was calling me in that direction. And I went ahead and went for it. You know, I just kind of sold out for it because I was in charge in my last few years on a large police department of the hiring, firing, recruiting, wellness process. And I watched men and women. They came into the career in their best condition, mentally, physically, spiritually, and would leave just broken, and they would die. I watched them retire. Once they lost their identity, they would die. And that broke my heart. So I saw that occur, and I thought, you know what, there's something to this. And it's not just in the first responder arena, it's everybody. This concept of PTSD and all that stuff, that is everybody today, and it's very rampant in our world, and we need to begin to get behind the origins of that and begin to find healing. So that led me in that direction, and I went with it with reckless abandon, and it hasn't stopped yet. My passion, obviously, I can't hide it.
Sure.
I don't try anymore. It is who I am, and I just believe that every person on this earth can live an optimal life, whatever that looks like to them. I mean, we're going to physically die, but we don't have to live life while dead.
Right.
We can live life while alive, and we need to live like that.
And this is a little bit of a left field, but I want to ask this question. Yeah. So you have kids as well now, right?
Yep.
So parenting and then you said you were a single dad for a little while too. And so how did that play out for you? And when you're adopted and you grow up, and you had good parents, adopted parents for sure. But how did you feel parenting your son, daughter? I mean,
yeah, two daughters and a son. As a single male, back in those days, that was unusual.
Yeah.
To be sort of a sole custodial parent. Felt alone. Kind of left out, cheated, sometimes angry about it, quite honestly. And I think people would understand that. You know, you go through situations, you're like, man, I don't want to do this. I didn't sign up for this. There's no manual, right? And so, you know, I had to kind of learn this thing, parenting, OJT, on the job training.
Yep.
And there was no concept that I had. I mean, I'm trying to talk to little girls about, you know, puberty. What is that about?
Kind
you
of
know,
ill-equipped, yeah.
I'm getting on the internet, you know, and I'm trying to what am I going to do? How am I going to have these conversations? And you know, certainly I did the best I could. I look back on it, and you know, oldest, middle, youngest, I can see improvement in my skill, you know, if you will, as I progressed in that. But it was tough. I mean, it was a challenging time in my life, to say the least.
And how did you sense God in that season?
Yeah, one of the interesting things, and you know, I've never told this a lot of times, but there was a time in my life where I was truly at the bottom, and I was, it was one of those times, you know, when God speaks to you, you know, and He speaks to us all the time, but this is one of those times you go, man, that was God. So I'm sitting in my living room, and I'm on the floor. And I'm literally in a place of complete and utter brokenness. And I was crying and weeping, and there was nobody around. And it was the worst time. I just felt like checking out, man. I mean, it wasn't like suicidal, but, you know,
Right.
Look, we're fools if we don't acknowledge that sometimes we feel like, you know, the world is too much for us, right? And I just went out of this thing. So I remember asking God, and I asked Him out loud, God, why is this happening to me? I asked that question. That's a fair one. I mean, people ask that thing, right?
Yeah.
And I heard Him speak. Now, did He speak out loud audibly in this thunderous voice? I don't know.
Sure.
But the bottom line is He spoke to me. And He said, what are you crying about? Look what they did to me. And I stopped. And it just shook me up, because I thought, okay, here's God in the flesh, Jesus, walking the earth. And He did nothing wrong. And we crucified Him. And I was accusatory as much as anybody, you know, because if we look at it like that. And that turned my world around, because I realized that you don't have to do anything wrong or right to have bad things happen to you in the world.
Yeah.
It just does. But God is with you in those things. And we can't get ourselves in a place where we think that we're worse off than somebody else. Because nobody went through what He went through. We can't even fathom that. I mean, here's the humanness of Jesus, you know, and He's going to the cross. And interestingly enough, He, before He went, knew what He was going to go through, could feel the pain before it happened, and knew the people that were going to betray Him before they betrayed Him. That's overwhelming.
Right.
So what am I, and what is my situation compared to that? It's nothing compared to that. So He kind of put it in perspective for me at that time. And at that point in time to get up off the floor, time to get up and move, and time to make whatever happens, but do your best, trust Him, and realize His presence is there.
And how do you see God cultivating? Because I hear you always kind of circle back with God, and God's kind of ground zero. So what does your connection with God look like, just kind of on a day-to-day basis?
He is everything to me. I could not say what I am or what I say without Him. My life now is like a movie, and that's the best way I can describe it. I'm watching a movie occur, and if I truly give it up and allow myself to be crucified to the flesh and become a slave to God, if you will, if I truly do that, it's like watching a movie play out and you happen to be in it, that is orchestrated and driven by someone else, in this case, God. And we've seen some extraordinary things happen in our lives, in our practice. Miracles are normal for us. People walking in health are normal. People getting healed is very normal. I expect it. I expect God to show up, and I'm just observing Him at work. I'm nothing different than anybody else. But I'm committed to being practiced, to giving my life up on a daily basis. And the more that I realize that and walk that pathway, the easier it becomes. The responsibility gets bigger, the challenges get bigger, but the easier it does become.
And I want to ask this question because I think this would be really interesting. So, do you have like daily routines? Things you
Yeah.
do like every day? I mean, obviously we like brush our teeth and that kind of thing. But what are some of the things you do every day, daily routines that you have?
So we're real structured, and I think that's the key to having disciplines, which sort of match the concept of disciples, right? So the concept of discipline means a lot to us. You know, I want to be predictable. I want to be someone who can be reliable. So we get up on a pretty much routine basis about 4:45 or 5. And so that means you have to back up your bedtime at a decent time.
Yep.
But we'll get up and typically we'll get ready for my day, maybe have a cup of coffee. And truly, this is what we do. I'm not saying this because we're on your show.
Sure.
We'll get up and have a cup of coffee and I'll read the Bible and just kind of meditate on God's Word. And I'll do that, 15, 30 minutes, just kind of get my day ready. And then my wife and I will typically go to the gym or we'll work out at the house. In working out, and this is again what we do,
Yeah.
I've been doing this for 40 years exercising. I mean, you got to do something to sort of break the monotony of it all. But I've transitioned my concept of exercise to just movement, where I put in praise and worship, and I'm just celebrating this kind of time where I can move. I mean, so I don't think about, am I trying to do better? Yes. But I'm thinking about the celebration of movement. So we'll do that for about an hour. We don't do that, spend a lot of time. You got to be very efficient. And then we'll go to work. So again, we've got ourselves prepped physically, emotionally, and spiritually to go give. And when we're at work, we get into people's lives. And we'll spend an hour with each person. So that goes on from typically 8 to 5, and we'll take a noon break. We force that, and we'll sometimes get out and walk around our complex outside and get some sunshine and some air. And then we'll typically have lunch during that time as well. We'll go home and have dinner. And then we just kind of wind down. And our evening is quiet. We don't watch a lot of TV. There's a lot of let me just put it bluntly, garbage on that right now and fear dripping.
Sure.
So we need to sort of minimize that. And then we'll have a time of we pray and then we go to sleep. And we typically are in bed 8:15, 8:30, and we just kind of have a nice wind down. Sometimes we'll read at that point in time, but it's important to have these pre-bed sort of routines.
Yep.
And that's our day typically. It sounds basic, but there's a lot of things that happen in that day, and that's a routine that works for us. And I highly encourage people to just get a routine.
Yep.
Become predictable in your own life, because it does ease the stress a little bit in your life if you are predictable.
And hobbies? What are things you like to do just to kind of exhale?
Yeah, I like to fish. I like to hunt. Sometimes I'll go out there and actually, this sounds crazy, maybe not to everybody, but I will sit up inside in a tree, right?
Yep.
And I'm watching the animals. I'm watching the sun come up. And that's the most peaceful time, just to see the world wake up, to hear the birds and hear noises that kind of startle you. What is that, right?
Yeah.
What's that walking towards me? Is something climbing the tree with me or whatever?
Sure.
But I enjoy that, and I enjoy getting outside. We enjoy to travel, see new places, experience new people, new things, new cultures. We like sitting and watching the ocean and hearing that noise, that whoosh, there's something about that. My wife and I both we're out in the public a lot, so people would think we're extroverts. No, it's the opposite of that. You just know when to turn it on and when to turn it off. But those are some of the hobbies we enjoy.
Where do you like to travel?
Oh, we love to go to Mexico and Hawaii, and we've been to Europe a few times. We recently, last year, went to Singapore. Really enjoyed that quite a bit.
Yep.
So just enjoy it. And, it's interesting enough in travel. One little mini story here. We were teaching a class on genetics in Singapore, and at one time in the room, we had at least one practitioner from every continent on the globe. Crazy.
That's
we're looking
cool.
out there and we're speaking in English, and we're loving them just the way we do. I mean, we can't sort of bring out Christianity in that teaching, but we bring out love, and he walks through us, and people know that. They know where we come from clearly, and many people come up and make comments afterwards. But it was interesting. The language of love crossed all spans of that. We had great relationship with every sort of person from every continent, and as well as the different religions worldwide. Fascinating to see that, and fascinating that love overcame all. So that's one of our greatest experiences while traveling recently, yeah.
Totally love. I mean, I get that.
Yeah.
And I know that international and love is a common denominator.
Totally. People want to experience love and they want to be loved. That's just the thing that God put in us as a whole that only He could truly fill up.
Because He is love.
You betcha.
Or
And
they are love, because there's 3 of them.
yeah, and so we look at that. That's deep. Well done. I like it.
Thanks for hanging out, and
welcome.
thank you so much for joining us. Of course, love to have you subscribe. Thank you for doing that. Give some comments. Hey, here's a question I'd like to get your input on. Where would you like to travel? Where in the world? And you're like, I don't want to travel, I just want to stay home. Well, that's okay too. Answer that way. But whatever it is, give me your answer. Where would you like to travel? Where would you like to go? Thank you again, and thank you for your feedback, your comments. Thank you for subscribing. And we're going to finish with a joke. I was trying to work on this. So when Santa has his sleigh, how come he never pays like the parking meter? Because it's always on the house. That is so lame. I know, I think that's lame, so I know you're groaning like serious. But of course, next time will be much better. Thanks again.